Hi, everybody. I'm McCarthy, alcoholic. Celeste, I loved hearing your story, and I'm really jealous that you can just get up and speak like that. I'm almost 6 years sober, and I still can't do that. So, yeah, that was a nice job. So I was a pretty high bottom drunk. I didn't lose my house, my family. I didn't wreck my car. I never went to jail, which is crazy because I drank and drove for 26 years and never even got pulled over. But I behaved in a way that was not becoming to a wife and mother. One year we were on vacation in, sorry, I'm just going to move that. In San Diego, and my husband and son had gone to bed, and I ended up crashing a wedding that was happening at the hotel that we were staying in. Ended up making out with some rando guy. Well, it was an open bar, and I mean, it was fun at the time. Another time up here in Prescott, after a wedding I had gone to, it was one of my good friends. A bunch of us went out to Whiskey Row. And so the bar closed, and I ended up inviting people back to our house to keep on partying. And one of them wanted to leave, so I said, "Why don't you call a cab?" He ended up stealing my husband's car. So the cops came. I was hysterical. It was horrible, and I didn't get out of bed for 2 days. And I remember telling my mom I needed help, but I actually wouldn't get help for about another 3 years. My sobriety date's May 24th, 2013. I didn't go to rehab or treatment. I came, actually, my first AA meeting was here. In this room, I sat in the back, kind of where Joe is. Yeah, you. And I remember I was crying as the steps were being read, and I followed along with them on the wall. I didn't know anything about AA. I just knew that there were steps, but I didn't know what it entailed. And I remember especially hearing the words powerless, unmanageable, and persons we had harmed. Those words really affected me as I was sitting there. And I wasn't really convinced that I was an alcoholic. Because I pictured an alcoholic as the old guy drinking Thunderbird out of a, brown paper bag under a bridge, like a hobo. I didn't realize that my brown paper bag was my coffee mug that I would take full of wine to my son's baseball practice, football practice, or when I would take him trick-or-treating on Mount Vernon. And then I'd drive him home, and sometimes, I think there was only one other time that I drove him home, and he had a friend in the car too, which is just, and I didn't even remember taking him home the next day. I thought he was having a sleepover, and I said, "Where's David?" And then I remembered that I had driven him home. So my husband had told me that I had to quit drinking. That was in May, like mid-May of 2013, if I wanted to stay married to him. Our son was 10 at the time, and he hadn't said "I love you" to me in years. I would say it to him, but he would never say it back, or he would never, say it to me initially. I would drink at home, but I would also go to happy hour on a regular basis, or I'd go grab a drink. Like around 5, I'd tell my husband I'm going to go to happy hour, and then I'd end up closing the bar. And my son would text me or call to say, when are you going to be home? And I would just ignore his phone calls, and I'd text back and say, I'll be home in 20 minutes, knowing full well that I had no intention of going home. I'd go to my parents' house and drink with my dad, or I'd go to my best friend's house and drink with her. So when my husband told me I had to quit drinking in May of 2013, I was like, okay, whatever. and I had gone down to Phoenix that weekend, that next weekend, for my friend Carrie's, her daughter was graduating from high school, and it was also her birthday. So I went down there, and when I got back, my husband said, "So how'd you do?" And I said, "Good, I didn't drink. I only had 4 beers." And he looked at me like I was crazy and was like, "That's still drinking." Because in my mind, since I wasn't drunk, it didn't count. So that's when he gave me the ultimatum to quit drinking and stay a family, or we were done. So again, I said, "So you mean cut back?" And he said, no drinking ever again. So I told him I would think about it, because the thought of never having a drink again was overwhelming. I was like, how do people even do that? Because I had tried to quit or cut back many times before. Like it says in chapter 3, more about alcoholism, we tried controlling it. I would switch from white to red wine because I thought I would drink it more slowly, or only drink on the weekends. And at one point, I even remember like measuring out the official portion of a glass of wine, which I think is like 4 ounces, by the way. And that would last for like 2 glasses, and then I would just finish the bottle. I had 3 doctors tell me that I drank too much. My therapist, I was going to see a therapist for postpartum depression. My primary care doctor, both suggested I go to AA, but again, I was like, that's for the old guy with the, drinking the Thunderbird. So Francis thinks I'm funny. And then there was the doctor that treated me for ulcerative colitis in the hospital. I was there for 3 days, and she told me that was an alcohol-induced condition. And then, in true alcoholic fashion, after I got out of the hospital, I had convinced myself that I was lactose intolerant, and that's why my gut had exploded. So. But I would wake up each morning and say I'm done, but by 4 o'clock, I was pouring a glass of wine, telling myself I'll just have a glass or 2. And now I know that whole routine of doing that day in and day out was the mental obsession and the allergy that's discussed in the doctor's opinion. The obsession was too strong, so I'd have that first glass of wine, and then the allergy is why I would drink 2 bottles instead of 2 glasses. And I tried over and over to stop, but I couldn't do it by myself. So like most of us in AA, that magic number 13, that's when I started drinking, was in junior high. And I remember I got sick that first time I drank, but I loved the effect that I got from alcohol. And then, I said, I'm never doing that again. And by the next weekend, I was raiding my parents' liquor cabinet. Like most of us, I was painfully shy. I wasn't cute. I felt out of place most of the time. Not that you're not cute, but I was not a cute kid. And I just had trouble relating to people and in social events. And so like so many of the stories in the back of the book that start off saying, I felt like I was different from a young age, or I didn't fit in, I can relate to that because that's how I felt. And it was weird though, because it seemed like I did have a happy childhood and adolescence, but I always felt like I didn't get the memo, or like something was off, and alcohol was the answer for me. I still had trouble talking to people at parties, but it took that pressure off and eased my anxiety. Like it states also in the doctor's opinion that we drink because we like the effect produced by alcohol. That we're restless, irritable, and discontent unless we can experience that sense of ease and comfort that comes from that first drink. Drinking wasn't foreign to me because my parents drank. They were always going out on the weekends or having parties at our house. It was at all of our family functions, holidays. And I was able to not drink when I was pregnant with my son in 2002, but after he was born, it got progressively worse. I just continued to drink more and more. And I didn't have to drink when I woke up first thing in the morning, to physically function. But by mid-afternoon, that obsession had kicked in, and I would convince myself that one glass wouldn't hurt, and that cycle would just start over. So I'm backtracking now to the ultimatum that my husband had given me, and so after 3 days, he said, "Have you made a decision?" And I said, "Well, I'm thinking about it." And he said, "Don't you think that's a red flag that it's either, me and Stuart, my son, or drinking, that you'd rather have a drink than be a family?" So I briefly grew a conscience and was like, "Oh my God, I'm an asshole," and said, "Fine, I'll do it." So I white-knuckled it for a week, and then I ended up coming here, like I said, because I was about to lose my mind. I was like, I don't know how people do this. So I was working at a store downtown in Prescott, and closing up at like 5 o'clock, and something inside me said, look up AA meetings in the area. So I know now that nudge was my higher power, who I call God. And I was clueless, but the people at the meetings were fun and interesting and entertaining. They talked about the steps and how their lives had changed. So I did what they told me to do, get a sponsor, work the steps, and I kept coming back. Those cliches are there for a reason. So I had no idea what AA entailed, and I had no idea that my life would change for the better with AA. I just thought I wouldn't drink any longer, or that I would keep drinking and hang out with other alcoholics at these meetings. I truly didn't know what AA was about. So I began working the steps with my sponsor. My step one was pretty easy because I had done some fucked up shit right before I had quit drinking, and my life was clearly unmanageable. And it was even the little things like I was at work one day and my mom texted me and said, "I'm saving your seat." And I was like, for what? I had no idea where I was supposed to be. And then I remembered that I was supposed to meet her at her church. She works at First Methodist. She was having a luncheon, and I was supposed to be her guest, and completely forgot. And then I remembered that we had been talking about it for like 2 weeks, and even talked about it the night before when I was at her house drinking, and just completely forgot. So then I'm at work, and I have to leave my coworkers that I'm cooking, I'm fixing lunch for them, and I'm like, I gotta go, bye, fend for yourselves. It was just rude stuff like that. So yeah, life was unmanageable. So step 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. When I first went over this with my sponsor, she had broken it down for me. The came to, she said, was sort of like waking up from a blackout. I thought it was kind of hokey, but I went with it. And then believe that a power greater than ourselves. This part I didn't have a problem with because I'd always believed in God. I grew up attending the Methodist Church down in Phoenix, and I've believed in God my entire life. It's just, since I came into AA, it has shifted. I grew up with this image of God as, kind of childlike. The thinking is kind of childlike, like God in the sky, in a throne on a cloud with white hair and white beard. And even when I was like 40, I was still pictured God like that. But so anyway, my idea of God has completely changed. Today I picture God as a light, an energy that is made up of entirely of love and humility. I feel like when the program talks about living in God's will, that's what it's talking about loving one another and practicing humility. But for those of you who struggle with God, I feel like if you just start kind of tossing around the idea, sorry, my nose is running, that you are not the center of the universe, that maybe there's something that's bigger than you are, that the idea of God can begin to creep in. And I love in the book, in the chapter We Agnostics, where it says, actually we were fooling ourselves, for deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. And so I know that for me, when I get that feeling in my gut, when I'm doing something I shouldn't be doing, or thinking something I shouldn't think, which is not living in God's will, to me that feeling is God. I believe, I believe in the Bible also that the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and to me that gut feeling is the Holy Spirit telling me right from wrong, which I think is the fundamental idea of God, that's within all of us. And then there's also the flip side to that, which it's not only when I'm doing something wrong, but when I'm doing something good, which is usually doing something nice or unselfish for someone, or even reading something spiritual or something out of the book that makes complete and total sense to me. I feel like that's God saying, yep, that's it. Pay attention to that. Let's see. Kind of going on step 2. Could restore us to sanity. The last part of that step. My sponsor had said something along the lines of not doing the crazy, stupid stuff we did when we were drinking, which I went with that for a while because I wasn't, drinking and driving or crashing weddings anymore. But now, as I've learned more about AA, I know that that insanity is the thought that I could control my drinking or drink like a normal person. And so, in other words, he's restored me to sanity or life without alcohol. And it's fulfilling, too. I know that Celeste was talking about not, having fun or, things that you were doing when you were drunk. People have these stories. But for me, it's being able to remember the concerts that I've gone to, the conversations that I've had with people, and some of the funnest times I've had have been in sobriety. And again, the cool part is that I remember it. For step 3, this didn't come easy for me. Like I said, I believed in God, but as far as turning my will over to God, it didn't come easy for me, and I had to work at it. And that's what this program is work. If you don't do anything or do it half-assed all the time, nothing will change. Early on, I made myself memorize the 3rd step prayer. I changed the these and the thous to you and yours to make it more relatable, less archaic or antiquated. And I said it every morning to get into the habit of not thinking about myself right off the bat. In working the steps, step 4 was probably one of the most beneficial and my favorite, actually. I know people get nervous about doing their step 4, but I learned so much about myself and that I had such a huge part in all of my unhappiness. In my 20s and 30s, I was always in the self-help section of the bookstore. We used to have bookstores, Barnes & Noble and Walden Books, things like that. But anyway, that's where I would hang out, was the self-help section, because I always felt like something was wrong or something was missing, and I wasn't happy. I felt like I didn't know how to do life or, adult. So a couple of years into my sobriety, I realized that the Big Book was the book that I had been looking for. I finally realized my part in things and how selfish most of my thinking was. I actually loved learning what my character defects were, and then to have the chance for God to remove those, and that I didn't have to behave like that anymore. And I'm not saying that I'm not a selfish asshole sometimes, but I'm actually aware of that fact now, and I can do something about it. And I don't continue with those behaviors, and then bad stuff happens, and then I get miserable, and in the past I would drink over it, and I just don't have to do that anymore. I made amends to my friends and family, and I was fortunate I didn't have any financial amends to make. With steps 10, 11, and 12, we have a plan to continue doing the right thing by admitting when we're wrong. If we've hurt someone, we make it right as soon as possible. And I'm not perfect with step 11, but I make an effort because I know that my sobriety is contingent on my spiritual condition. I hear people come back from relapses and share in meetings about the fact that they quit praying, quit going to meetings, quit meeting with their sponsor or sponsees, and I take it very seriously. I have 2 service commitments. They keep me active and connected in AA. I give people rides to meetings. I helped a coworker move over the weekend, like all weekend, Saturday, Sunday, and I was exhausted. But it freaking kept me sober this weekend. When I'm helping someone else and doing the right thing, I'm much less apt to get into trouble. And I'm grateful for the things I have today: a roof over my head, food in my fridge, my son who wants to hang out with me. He's 16 now. He was 10 when I got sober, and like I said, he wouldn't say, "I love you." I would say it to him, and he would say, like, he was 10, "I poop you too," or "I know," or I remember one day I was dropping him off at school. His dad was out of town, and I said, "Bye, I love you," and I had been doing it every day for a week, and I think he forgot, and so he said, "I love you too," and then he looked at me and was like, "And you're boring," because like I can't say that. I got to give you a dig too. So, but he, now we have this whole routine where, I'll say, "I love you 87 billion times, triple stamp it, no takebacks," and then he'll say ditto, and we do this whole thing. It's cute. But he, wants to hang out with me now. And so those are the things that come from working this program. I believe that by working the steps, we're all grounded in humility. We take ourselves down a notch, and we're able to see the amazing things that happen as a result of working the steps. Again, living in God's will. Our attitudes change, and then when we look back over the fact that we're less quick to anger, if we do anger, it's short-lived. We look at our fault in things and make it right if we've hurt someone. We're helping others, not thinking so much about ourselves, and we don't constantly obsess about drinking. And that's what has happened for me in working the steps. And I say we because it's a fellowship, and there are millions of people who've gotten sober by working those steps. And it's very simple, but like it also says in the book, you have a spiritual awakening if you do those steps to the best of your ability. And I haven't had a sip of alcohol in almost 6 years. It doesn't mean I don't think about drinking or that thought doesn't come up, but I have a plan of action to help with that and to keep me from drinking. So I hope that you stay. And like I said, get a sponsor, work the steps. And I truly think that service commitments are huge. They keep you sober, they keep you connected, and keep coming back. So that's all I have. So.